Well, I've determined that Phil the Bobcat is more appropriately going to be called Felicia the Bobcat, as in, bye Felicia. I've spent close to a year and a half dinking with this thing, and I'm pretty much done with it at this point. I've sunk almost $25,000 into this machine, and those that swear by Bobcat say a 250 is a really good machine, especially this year model and make, about 2005-ish. It was one of the best machines that they ever made, according to a lot of people. To be honest with you, I've always kind of figured it to be a little underpowered. And after having to pull this drive motor on this left side for the 4th time, I'm pretty much done with it. I'm sick of it, tired of it. I wish I had my old John Deere 450 back, because when I pushed into a pile with that thing, I didn't stop. If I did stop, you just take another bite. Real quickly, also too, this is a standard flow machine, not a high flow machine. It's also not the high lift. This drive motor, first time we pulled it off, it was just leaking out the seal out here, the output seal. That's the way I originally bought it. Okay, cheap insurance. Well, I got everything else tore out. Let's go have it rebuilt. Rebuilt it by a company called DC Heavy Hydraulics, and they're now in Union, South Carolina. They were up in a place called Gaffney, which was a little bit closer to me. So they rebuilt it. I got it back, set it in the barn for about a month and a half, 2 months, while I was working on some other stuff. I had the fuel tank out of this thing, had the engine out of it, a whole bunch of other stuff. When I got it put back on, I put this side back in, fired the machine up, and the two halves were trying to twist themselves in half. What their technician had done is left some bolts internally loose, where this half and this half of the machine drive motor were actually trying to twist themselves in half. I didn't even put the tracks on. Pulled it right off, pulled the other one off, not to mention the brakes weren't locking up either. So I pulled them both off, trotted them back down there. They fixed the other side. Said they fixed this side. I put it back on and finally got the machine going about April of this past year in 2022. And I used this machine for 46 and a half, almost 48 hours. And the output seal goes out in it again. So it makes the 3rd time. And now I took it down to them, dropped it off as the 12th of September. And they took a month to rebuild it. A month. I get it back on last Tuesday. I pick it up. Don't have time to set it in place that night. I had to do something else the next night. Got it finished up the install on Thursday evening. Friday night I used it for maybe an hour and a half. Okay. Saturday morning, yesterday morning, I used it for another hour and a half, and this happens. If you're looking close, you can see the whole back side of the motor right there is blown out. Eased up into a pile of gravel, heard a click. I looked down and I got fluid spilling out from underneath me. So, bye Felicia, I'm done with you. Now this is actually the upgraded drive motor. As you can see, the distance between here and here is kind of short compared to the other one. This is the upgraded drive side, the one that's supposed to have the better bearing in it. Apparently not. Here's another way you can tell. Look at your drive sprockets. Look at your drive sprockets. There's probably only about 4.5 inches depth in this one here. The other one's going to be about 7 inches depth. You can see on this side here, on the right side, how much taller that top hat is. You can see this band right through here. That's kind of missing on the other one. This is the old style drive motor. This one has not given me a lick of trouble, except where DC never set the brakes up in it. I don't know. I don't get it. I've had to rebuild every cylinder on this thing. I've had the valve body out and got it rebuilt. I even had DC rebuild the hydrostats, and I'm not entirely sure there's not something wrong in there either. I've had the engine out. This is the Kubota engine. The engine part runs fine. But another issue I have with Bobcat too, here's another thing. I'm used to heavier equipment where it's gear on gear or drive shaft. Bobcat sets these engines in sideways. Well, the way they power them is this is a belt housing that then runs to a a shaft that runs through your hydrostats. And on the other side of the hydrostats, on the far side, is where it finally reaches the main hydraulic pump. So your fluid comes out of your reservoir, up here in the front, goes into your main hydraulic pump, and then the hydraulic pump pumps it back through the hydrostat pumps, which are also being powered and pumped again by your drive belt. Number one failure on these things is the drive belt tension goes slack, and that results in eating a main hydraulic pump. In an old case that I was in years ago, this motor was mounted front to back and went straight into your actual hydraulic pump, and then out of the hydraulic pump went to everything else. I don't get it why Bobcat's trying to put it back here. I mean, I'm sure it had something to do with weight distribution and keeping all the weight in the rear or something, but I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't believe in powering things with belts. Go-kart, fine. Piece of machinery, no. Okay, looking down in here, you're basically going to be looking at two lines. You see the blue cap there, and then just back underneath the edge of the frame here, you're going to see another blue cap. This is one of your, it's the brake line, and then the other one's a case drain line. And this one's got a crazy S-curve on it. You're looking at 3/4 and 11/16 to break those two lines loose, and then the bolts on the actual top of your two directional flow lines are 9/16. And they're kind of a cap style. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there it is right there. There's 4 bolts that just sort of encapsulate all the way around it. Your actual main bolts for the housing, sprocket are 15/16, and also the ones that hold it into the frame itself are 15/16. So I'm getting really way too good at pulling these things off. The way you loosen the track up is right here. See all the grease is coming out. There's a grease zerk right there. Undo that grease zerk. And then what I end up doing usually, as you can see this trick here, I got an iron bar that I just loop a big heavy ratchet strap through and throw that bar in there, and that pins it so that it doesn't pop back through. And then I ratchet strap it off the back to pull and make a big loop in the track back here. You're going to have to pry bar it off of the actual frame. It's another thing that the engineers at Bobcat, and probably some of the rest of them too, to me it's a flaw on one hand. They let the track ride underneath this scoop right here. So if you're going to work on it, it's an absolute pain in the rear. With a newer track like this one here that I picked up used, once you get that bow started in there, you physically have to pry it off of the machine in order for it to create enough of a loop to get the guard off. There's a big metal heavy guard that's laying over here behind me. To get the guard off, to be able to pry the track off far enough to get in there and get the actual motor loosened up. So again, there's not much I can say about this machine that's easy to work on. It's literally a pain in the rear, and my dealings with Bobcat is they want me to bring it to them, and they want me to pay them by the hour to fix everything about it. And if you're any good at reading schematics, you're going to look at the schematics and go, what idiot designed that? It's not mechanic friendly. Although I will say the track machines are a lot better, as in down in here you've got a big access panel to where once you have the track and the track motor off, you can get to a lot of stuff on the side of the engine. You have a panel here that is it's big enough to tease you with getting into, and then down in here you've got another panel. But again, if you're trying to get into that panel, you got to get the track off. And then when they designed this undercarriage, there's not a whole lot of room because this big honker is holding you up from getting into that hole. And that hole you really need to be able to get into and get your whole arm and half your body into if you're trying to chase any of the hydraulic lines and or the wiring. And this undercarriage is fine for flat ground. This undercarriage sucks when you're going through the woods. ASV makes a heck of an undercarriage for going through the woods. People say it's lighter duty. Well, I don't know. It seems to be working. But this one right here will flat out jar your teeth off. There's several videos on YouTube you can watch where they take a Bobcat, a Case, a Kubota, and a couple others, and they run them through torture tests, and you will see the Bobcat spilling most of the contents out of its bucket when it's using this undercarriage. This is stiff. It's very stiff. I will admit it's overbuilt, but it also does not handle very well and transfers all of that vibration back into the cab and into the loader bucket itself, causing you a very unstable platform when it comes to working with your load on the end of a fork or whatever else. Let me get this track motor off and we'll see where we can go from there. Here we go. Oh, almost got the finger that time. Dang. Yeah, there it is. So Rexroth is what these things are. And Rexroth is what Cat uses, or did back in the day as well, on these things. And what they said, that from what I've been reading, is Cat did a little bit better system that everybody else pretty much tried to copy. I don't know. Haven't worked on them. Haven't worked on the Cat version myself, so I wouldn't really know. I'm not going to open it up, but you can see that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 bolts exploded off of this thing. Being this thing only lasted 2.5 hours on DC Heavy Hydraulics' rebuild, and I'm 4 days away from my actual original warranty on this thing expiring on the 26th of October. I am not going to open this up. That is their problem, and we are going to drop it on their doorstep tomorrow morning and figure out exactly what they want to do about it. Sadly though, because I don't even have a usable core at this point. They have been into this thing 3 times now, and at this point I'm robbed of a usable core, because whatever they did at this point that blew up inside there is no longer usable as a core. So yeah, I'm pretty well screwed. These things go for between $3,000 and $4,000 is what I was looking at on the internet last night. Yeah, not fun. Not fun at all. Bobcat, yeah, I'm done with you. Okay, a couple other issues that I've got with Bobcat. Okay, back up in here you can see where the cab, where it tilts, that is an open cavity that basically, it's a trough where the back of the cab and the engine housing cooling area meet. There's nothing there, so it is a constant trap for junk, as you can see. So as soon as you lift the cab, where does that all go? Falls right down here into your actual bowels of your machine. I had to pressure wash and hydraulic mine out about 6 inches worth of crap from down here on either side of this main hump, and that required getting these panels on either side opened up. And like I said, where this track and the mainframe assembly sit, it looks like there's a lot of room there. Okay, maybe for a 12-year-old you can get your arm and everything in there. Me, I'm 5'7" and I weigh almost 200 pounds of muscle. You physically cannot contort yourself to get down in there, much less get a tool in there very well. So you're constantly digging crap out of this thing. And yes, this one is a non-cab version, as it just has the open ROPS, as they call it, or your skeleton cab. But still, I feel like there shouldn't quite be this much access for big sticks, leaves, etc. When we were in here once before, I showed you in an earlier video where these 2 lines up in here were hard to get to. This is your main hydraulic lines. These guys right here should not be this close together. That's an engineering nightmare. Also, these things are a closed loop system, so you're really only packing about 5 gallons of hydraulic oil after your system is filled. You blow a line, as what happened to me, you can't even get yourself out of the way before your entire system's done. Plus, it scavenges off of its own system. Does it go through the filter? Yeah, pretty much on a return. Down here, that silver little canister down there is the case drains for your motors. So you're really pushing like an inch volume of these big lines here. You get 2 of them. It goes out, it runs through your motors and goes back in the other side, but then it pushes a little bit back through here to say that it's filtering. 1 filter for both drive motors. Not a real good design. Here's your routing. Here's where it sucks and scavenges off of the actual tank over here. It runs along the edge of the engine, goes into this fitting here, and then this one is your return from up above. Up above is your filter, and as it runs back down and goes back to your coolers, and it ends up coming back over into your valve body right here. Valve body as well. A couple of issues there. In order to get that sucker off of the frame out here, you're not just bolting it to the actual side here. There's a bracket that bolts to the side, and then the frame bolts to that bracket. So to get up in there again, you got to get through that side access panel and contort the crap out of yourself to get in there. And they don't put any lock washers or nylock nuts, or you would think, as a company as advanced as Bobcat is, you probably weld nuts to the actual bracket. No. Thus requires you to either get somebody else in here, so we're paying 2 guys at hourly wage to get in this thing and work on it, or you're gonna, if you're out there by yourself trying to do it, you're dinking around in the backyard. The shuttle linkage up on top up here, I can't really say a whole lot about it. I mean, it operates, but I think it's a fairly rudimentary system. It harkens back probably to the 60s and some stuff I've seen back there. Again, this is your belt housing over here, and why you would decide to run anything off of a belt, even in 2005, is beyond me. The shaft goes through the first hydrostat, then the second hydrostat hooks into the back of the first hydrostat, and then runs all the way back here to your main hydraulic pump back here. So like I said, you can run these rascals dry, because this guy has to pump fluid back through it. All you've got is a bypass shaft in there that's actually turning them things. It's taking charge pressure off this and putting it back into here. And where's that located? Back of the pump. Now, where's your fuel sending unit at? In between the pump and your motor back there. So guess what? You're forced to pull the motor and the hydrostats all in the same shot. And to do that, Bobcat wants you to buy a special tool that hooks into the top of the motor up there. And guess what? They designed it to lift off of the aluminum intake. Come on, guys. You got about 800 and some odd pounds worth of junk hanging off of 2 bolts on an aluminum intake that's not even a 1/4 inch thick. Good job. Oh. The controls. Some of these guys are using, like you see, lever controls in here. The actual controls up here on one of these open cab jobs, these switches fail because they're constantly out here in the weather. Granted, I like little joysticks and stuff myself, but if you don't have something that's more waterproof than this, it's going to go away. It's going to fail. Other companies, like I think it was in 2005, Cat and maybe in Case actually started using pilot controls. And if you're not familiar with pilot controls is this stick assembly would then sit back over here, and what it was a big hydraulic joystick that individual lines ran up into, like a little plenum that rocked back and forth, that gave a signal pressure to a bigger valve somewhere in the back. That's how most of your big excavators are run. So additionally, also too, this fan has got to go. That fan again also allows crap to slide down through here, and if anything's loose in here, it's sucking more of this garbage into your actual cooling fan. Your cooling fan pushes out both sides of your machine to the point where if the machine's running and you're trying to add hydraulic fluid, or if it's running for some reason you're trying to add fuel, I know the book says you ain't supposed to, but come on, what's real life? It's pushing so much air out either side of the machine, you can't even do that without blowing it all over yourself. Nor can a person walk up beside you and yell at you through the cab because of the airflow pushing out. Some of the others, on the other hand, and this one also, this one here will actually suck air down through the grates in the back. Terex and some of the others push that air up through there. Thus you don't have a big problem with junk collecting on your airplane, your cooling deck back there in the back. So that little rascal there is actually sucking air in, thus it's a prime hotspot for garbage. Not a real good design there either, guys. As far as creature comforts go, if you're a big guy, that lap bar is going to pinch you in the gut. You know, I got kids, and I got a 4-year-old who is barely 35, 40 pounds. She's tall and really skinny. Yeah, if I got her in my lap with me, that bar won't come down. And like I said, I'm not a real thick guy. I'm just barrel chested. But as far as the gut goes, no, sorry, ain't nothing here. Creature comforts go, between the sticks and the floorboard again is another place that collects garbage. And all that washes into the belly. And there's one note here that, okay, you guys did a little bit better job on the track machines than you did the wheel machines. And if you don't know the denotation between track machine and the wheel machine, if it's an S190, 150, S1, S200, S250, that's S stands for the wheel version. And the T stands for the track version. One thing I'll give Bobcat credit for, I love these 18-inch tracks. They're nice and wide. You can kind of float over some terrain. But, yeah, we've already been over the undercarriage. So, on these machines, like I said, I can't fit my little girl in between the handlebar and myself. I know you're not supposed to be riding passengers, but come on. Daddies do like to move their kids around the yard in the machine with them a little bit. My little boy is actually just begging, chomping at the bit, trying to get in the machine with me. But he's only 1.5 years, so it's not exactly good for that one yet. Spool valves. Let's look at spool valves real quick here. Oh. The brake valve is way back up in here. Not a real good location. I mean, it is tucked back up and all the way up against in there. So, quick note, if you ever have one of these dead machines, get up in there and grab the brake valve. I believe, actually, I can't remember exactly where the line comes off. I'd have to look. There's a feed line right in here off the valve body that goes up in there. Okay, yep. Yeah, that shiny thing right there, if you can see it, there's a little shiny cap back in there. That is your little old spool valve servo for the brake valve, but it is tucked back in there. And again, you got to get into it from the access panel on the side or hang like a monkey upside down in here. You just barely see it in between those lines there. If you got one of these as dead machine, basically, if you can energize that particular solenoid to open or grab the line on the downhill side of it, in other words, coming out here to the front, put a porta power on that, and that will send pressure back. It'll send pressure back to your brakes and your motors and free your brakes up. That way you can actually dead roll one of these things if you absolutely have to, instead of just dragging it like a dead carcass. So what I was saying about the S model versus the T model, the S model has even less room in it than this one does. The T models actually do have more room because of this center hump here is actually just a bolt in. There's nothing underneath it. It only acts as a pivot point right here for your pedal controls. So, and at that point you've got basically some big old wells in here, and you can see my access panels are removed on the side for clean out purposes. Being that I'm still pulling leaks out of this thing, I kept the panels open so I could continue to wash it from time to time and get it cleaned out. Now watch this valve right here. Those of you that have a 190 through 250 or 300, if this guy's not in place, you ain't going nowhere. This is something I had to learn the hard way. This right here sets the pressure for the entire rest of your system. When I got this machine, this guy was gone, including the plug-in, and a test port was put in that location. I was wondering why I wasn't having any hydraulic pressure. Sure, I could fire it up and move it around the yard, but I didn't really have any hydraulic pressure to do much of anything. I was popping a code once in a while. Couldn't figure it out. Took it to Mark Wisnat at Upstate Equipment Repair and Rental, and he figured it out. This is after I'd already had the valve body rebuilt by a local hydraulic shop, but I guess they put it back together. Monkey see, monkey do. What was there, we put back in. Done deal. Visibility up in the actual cab itself flat out sucks. Currently my bucket is not very high off the ground, but in sitting here, You can kind of see if you look left or right, the boom is right in your way. They've changed a lot of that since 2005 when this machine was made, but I can look underneath the boom and kind of see where I'm at. But with the bucket sitting right here in front, you can't see a darn thing. And on this side, with your actual boom arm support, you can't see anything there either. So I end up looking out through here a lot, which is right out the corner. Still can't see what's directly behind you except for the big back window. If you've got a mirror or something to look out the front with, that guy's gonna hang right there and hit you in the head on the way out the door. So not a real good time there either. Also, with these older systems up here, you'll see this kind of display. You can look up there. That display is not too bad, except you don't know what your machine has for options or not. This one does not have bucket positioning. This one does not have variable flow, so I have to hit this button twice to get my grapple to work out front on those hydraulics right there. Auxiliary pressure release, what that does, if you don't know, hold it down to do your auxiliary hydraulic release. It basically just kills your engine. It's a glorified shutoff switch. If you want me to use that, just tell me so and I'll just turn the machine off. Traction lock override. So as soon as you actually get the thing fired up and going and you close your bar, see that blinking light on your bar up there? Now you can push the override to controls. There you go. Now you're in business. If you want to override that, then you got to hit this guy here. Still ain't going to allow you to move very much. Codes. You want to pull codes off this thing, push and hold in the light switch. And it's going to say no codes. Thing with these older machines like this, they don't hold the codes around. So if you pop a code, write it down, because as soon as you activate the key switch over there, it's gone. And it's not going to come back until you activate it, or until that code gets tripped again. Your lights up through here, you better look in your book to figure out what they are, because they're not terribly self-explanatory. Battery, fuel, yeah, if the fuel even works. This one's an ACS. I don't have ACS. If you've got the actual joystick controllers down here instead of the lever controllers, then ACS is for you. Advanced Control System, they call it. You can look up Andrew Kamatari up there up north, and he goes into a real good detail about replacing the ACS. The ACS computer is going to be over here in the right-hand kick panel, and that's about $1,500 by itself. Not to mention the wiring that goes along with it. Your regular computer for this thing, you can see part of it right there, as I got part of the panel removed. In there, that is $1,000. Here's one of my gripes with Bobcat again. The computer was missing out of this thing when I bought it. $1,000 for the computer, right off the cuff. Serial number specific. They take one off the shelf, program it to your serial number, hand it to you, and out the door. They say, oh, come back and see us. I said, oh, okay, thanks. They said, no, you will come back and see us. You have 10 hours of key switch time on that computer before it'll lock down completely. And even we can't unlock it unless you get the machine into us and allow us to actually set the computer. I said, you've got to be kidding me. 10 hours of key switch time. Boys, I did not have enough time to get the machine running with as much as I've had to do to this thing. Valve body, hydrostats, pull the engine, pull the fuel tank, wash out the hydraulic system, wash out the fuel tank, reinstall all that stuff, plus the drive motors, and rebuild every cylinder on this thing. And not to mention replaced a couple of lines too. So, confining me to 10 hours of key switch time, key switch on, yeah, not good, fellas. Yeah, another thing that kind of burns me up too, my old 450 John Deere, I could pick something up that weighed well over 5,000 pounds, anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 pounds. That sucker would pick it up, carry it around the yard. It wasn't pretty, and it tore a lot of things up in the process. This thing, to weigh almost 9,000 pounds, its lifting capacity is only about 2,500 pounds. You might eke out 2,500 to 3,000. But you can't go over anything but level ground. It'll tip forward on you and so on. I read recently where I think it was New Holland actually has one out that'll pick up close to 4,000 pounds on an under 10,000 pound machine. So how they're doing it, I don't know. Something to look into. I don't have that kind of money floating around, but like I said, originally I bought this thing for $11,500, and I think at current I've got almost $25,000 in it. So that's with the cost of the actual buying the machine, but it's been a year and a half as well in the process. So I am not happy with it whatsoever. So what I've heard somebody talking the other days is, you know, he says Bobcat may have started the market on this with Clark originally, got these compact loaders going, hitting the market real hard, but these guys have been riding that name and that niche market ever since. Several other companies have done better with them, like Cat, for instance. You know, those guys have took off. They entered that small market, and they're constantly innovating. They have the ASV track systems on them now, which was what I was talking about earlier. ASV makes a heck of a track system that is spongy and actually absorbs the ground, kind of like what you'd see on an armored personnel carrier. Terex is also using that ASV track system, and Cat was buying the suspensions off ASV. So, and then like I said, these guys are they're real good on flat ground, but when you start rumbling out through the woods up here, they're not too good. Bobcat, on the other hand, is an entry-level machine. It's an economy machine. If you get into one and you're fine, you're a homeowner, a rancher, and all you're doing is scooping grain, that's fine. But if you're going to try to take one of these machines into the woods and use it, you're going to be trying to upgrade fairly quick. High flow on this thing, I tried to convert it to a high flow hydraulic system while I had everything tore out of it. I talked to Bobcat, and they gave me a schematic printout. They wouldn't give me any part numbers. They said, no, we're not going to. You need to bring it to us and we'll do the install for you. I said, sorry, dude, I don't have an extra 10 grand floating around. I said, plus it's an open cab machine. I said, I want to be able to run a mulcher, but it ain't going to happen with this thing. So, out of luck there too. But again, you know, if I can go find a shake a money tree, which is what I was hoping, I could take this machine, pull enough side jaws to pay for itself within a year or two, and beat the bushes for a little bit more. But no. Ain't happening. Ain't happening. So if somebody wants it worse than I do, by all means, it can go down the highway pretty quick. And I've got some spare parts floating around here for it. I'll keep my grapple and my forks, but you know, I'll let the bucket go with it, because it came with it. But you know, I got a couple extra spare tracks laying around too for it. But otherwise, yeah, we'll see what DC says and go from there. Well, just got done putting that video together. I'd been holding off doing that one for a while, as it's now late February, and as you figured out in the video I was talking, it was late October. I was hoping to have some closure on the deal. Basically, I pulled that motor, took it to DC. They were very apologetic after I got a hold of the actual owner of the company. Her name's Ann. It was a very nice lady to talk to. She said, we're going to make this right. So she got a hold of Mark up at Upstate Equipment, and they rounded up enough pieces to put that particular drive motor back together. She did request that I pull a test on my drive pressures or my brake pressures to see if possibly the brake pressure had spiked and blew the back of the housing out. They fixed it. They fixed the drive motor. I got it put back on, and before I even hooked up the lines to it, I went ahead and pulled a test. My test was at wide open throttle and at idle, and I was pushing about between 350 and 450 PSI on that brake, which is within spec for that machine. So ruled that one out, that the brake pressure had spiked and blew the back of the housing out. Didn't really find anything down below in the guts of the thing that said that the hydrostatic pressure had crossed over into the brake housing and caused it to blow out, but you know, clearly something happened to have 14 bolts blown off of it. I picked up that motor about 2 weeks after I dropped it off with them. I got it put back on a Saturday night. I ran the thing up the hill about 100 yards, counter rotated perfectly. I mean, it ran perfect. Come back down the hill, parked it, shut it off. The next afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I went back to put it to go pick up some tree limbs with it, and the thing had hard sticks. Did not want to counter rotate right or left, and felt like the brakes were on. So something was obviously wrong. I rolled it down, I shut it down. Being the thing's been temperamental in the past, I fired it up a day or two later and brought it down here because I knew the alternator was giving trouble. So I brought it down below down here, I mean literally 100 yards travel time, and shut it down. got out of it, and there's a puddle of oil underneath it. That same motor was leaking again. I diagnosed my alternator real quick and drove it back up, parked it, put it on a trailer, and dropped it off at Mark's place in Pacolet, South Carolina. That was November 19th. It is now the 19th of February, and in all honesty, I told Mark no hurry because I'm disgusted with the machine and I want it gone. But yeah, we still have no diagnosis on it whatsoever. I've been up to my eyeballs in that house that I showed you in a couple other videos. I'll do a walkthrough on it pretty soon and show you what all's taken place on it. Major transformation. Pretty much I've had to gut the entire interior of that house, and I'll take you along on, show you some of that too. Hopefully Mark will figure out what's wrong with Felicia, because the last time I talked to one of his mechanics down there about a month ago, they were diagnosing something very similar on another 250 that they had. And hopefully it'll run long enough and get Felicia down the highway. And I don't want to say let it be somebody else's problem, but maybe put it somewhere to a place where, you know, they can utilize the Bobcat and keep it within its realm of usage. When I say that I really wish I had my old John Deere 450 back, my 450 was a 70 or 75 horse machine, and that Bobcat up there is an 80 or 85 horse machine. So when I say I feel like that thing's underpowered, yeah, it's definitely underpowered. Now the 450 was a 16,000 pound machine, so when it moved, it moved. That Bobcat's a 9.5, almost 10,000 pound machine. So if you want to crucify me and say apples to apples, oranges to oranges, that's fine, but you know, for pound, horsepower wise, it hasn't stood up. And like I said, I'm done with Bobcat. I'm heading somewhere else at this point. So otherwise, take care, guys. Sorry it's been such a delay. I've really been up to my eyeballs in a lot of stuff lately. Haven't been able to upload things, especially with the crappy internet that I got. And more on that later. Take care.